all the parts of the Masters of the Universe brand, perhaps nothing is as mysterious and, well, almost well known by the public as Castle Grayskull. And if you've been following the Spector Creative channel with me, your host, Scott Toy Guru Neitlich, you know I've made quite a few videos about Castle Grayskull, but there always seems to be another tale yet to tell. And one of the things that comes up a lot is the evolution of the castle and how it went from the original Mark Taylor version, which some fans call Skull Castle, back when the brand was called Lords of Power, and eventually became Castle Grayskull. And even the prototype of Castle Grayskull, which showed up first in the mini-comics, which was based on the original sculpt that Mark Taylor worked on, still looked a little different from the actual toy we all had. You can see an image of the original prototype here, which included things like the Stygian moat, which I covered in the Abyss video, as well as more than one accessory that didn't make it into final production, including things like the Jetpack and the torture rack, although both are referenced in the mini-comic, which is interesting. When we finally got our castle, it was not exactly the original sculpt. It was kind of, compressed down, and some accessories were removed for cost reasons. But for us as kids, before there was an internet, we just knew we had an awesome castle with awesome accessories. It didn't matter that some of them were cut and some of them made it, because we really had no idea. We just were excited that we had all of these awesome ways to play with the castle, with thrones and laser guns, and, where's a laser gun on a castle? Training devices, etc., etc. Well, this video, I want to focus on this accessory in particular, which is kind of one of the most mysterious ones, mostly because it's upside down in this image and you can't see it. There we go. Let's flip it over. Yes, the Castle Grayskull Spacesuit, well, and computer. They were attached, but really the spacesuit. Or is it a spacesuit? Is it a robot? Is it an android? Is it a character? What is it? It was one of those things as kids that we had inside of our castle, leaning against the wall. He had a gun, he had a computer. It was really colorful, but what was it, and how in the world did it relate to the castle? Was this an actual character? Well, when we did the classics version of Castle Grayskull, we looked a lot at the prototype and different aspects of it, and we really wanted to include a lot of those accessories that were cut, such as the Batwing jetpack you see there on the right. But of course, we also wanted to include accessories from the original castle, but really take them to the next level, giving them, paint and full movement, and not just be stickers and cardboard cutouts, which a lot of them were. Granted, you did get, some 3D molded items like the blaster cannon and throne, but a lot of the other accessories were done as stickers, like the dungeon, like the flag, like the eagle, or not eagle, the weird beastly wing thingy, whatever it is. And we could do these as actual sculpts on the new classics version of Castle Grayskull because it was aimed at collectors. Other items that shipped with the original, as I said, were cardboard cutouts, like the spacesuit, the computer, and that second weapons rack. And these were done as a cost-saving maneuver for the original line so that kids had more items to play with, but doing things as cardboard cutouts or stickers is way less expensive than tooling them. Tools cost anywhere from $10,000 to $100,000, depending on how big they are. One item that didn't make the cut in the classics line was that second weapons rack, which was the cardboard cutout version, not the weapons rack that actually was made of plastic, the little orange one. And I do wish we'd gotten to this, or at least had found a way to maybe do this in a weapons pack later in the line. And it was always kind of lamented that it had to be lost. But when you were picking and choosing which items to include in the classics version, something like the spacesuit slash robot slash whatever this bug-eyed thing is was much higher on the priority list. Not only because it looks so cool, but there was so much mystery about what it is. And there had been quite a lot of fan customs over the years doing this suit as a fully articulated figure, and the original idea with the castle was to include this as a bonus action figure, like any other classics figure. But unfortunately, when we were looking at costs, this was one of the first things that had to sort of be cost reduced. And instead of doing a fully articulated figure, we just did a 3D sculpt. It was still as tall as a figure. It still, kind of looked like a figure if it was just standing there, but it wasn't articulated. And if you flipped it over, it was actually hollow on the back in order to save costs. This was sort of similar to the Dungeon Grate, which also had to become a sticker and not a sculpted piece, because again, there had to be some cost reductions to make the castle work for the price point we promised it at. And while this looked cool, and he got to stand next to his computer and be in the same spot as the vintage Castle Grayskull, he wasn't cardboard, but he was still just standing there. And for me personally, and for a lot of fans, I think that this didn't satisfy the need to both understand who or what this was, as well as to have that fully articulated version that could act as an action figure. And when I say that fans did customs of this, I mean, one, some of them were incredible. I am not talented enough to do this. But fans had made up not just customs, but whole backstories for this armor and what it could be. And we knew this was something we really wanted to address in Classics, because that was a big part of it, was kind of solving these mysteries, or at least shedding some light on them, and noting what fans were making customs of, or which items fans were kind of making up backstories of, was something that, that was kind of a flag post that led us to which direction we should go in and which things we should focus on. And while fans made up names like Defendor, or I think this one's called Radar, and again, I think this one is one of Joe's, a big fan of his work. Again, I am not that talented. I cannot do things like this. But people were not just, again, making custom figures, but they were making up names, and they were making up whole backstories to the figures and, or to this suit. So we wanted to address this. And the tool we were going to use to address this was the mini comics, because this was the only tool we really had beyond the bios to expand the canon and expand the storytelling. And it was very deliberate that we wanted to reveal the mystery of the suit. So working with Axel, who is an amazing artist, again, I don't have this kind of talent that artists and customizers do, he drew up what this character could look like as a full figure. And we named him Jetpack. Actually, I named him Jetpack. Axel drew the image. And once we had approved the rough sketch, he went on to kind of a final sketch, and then went on to do a colored version. And you will notice, even in the black and white and the colored version, you can see the character or a human's face inside. And I'm going to get to that in a moment, of why versus the cardboard cutout, you don't see a face at all. It just has the kind of yellow shield there. So part of turning this into an actual character, besides giving him a name, it required a backstory. So in the mini-comics, He-Man and Skeletor find themselves on Tralla, which, for those of you following He-Man timeline and backstory, that is Orko's planet, or the Orko's people. And they are the sort of great mages, the council that created the Sword of He and infused it with the power of the universe in order to protect the power so that it couldn't be used for evil, which, of course, evil Trollans like the unnamed one, Gorpo, tried to steal it, and that's a story for a whole other time. But that wave of energy, that wave that created the universe, was stored inside this sword by Orko's people on Tralla. And when He-Man found himself on Tralla, he allied himself with fellow heroes that were trying to defend it from evil. And in addition to the vintage Create-A-Character runners-up, we added some extra characters like Hans Hammerholder, Man Crystal, and Jetpack there on the right. So these were characters deliberately created so that if fans wanted them after they saw them, we now had access to doing more characters in Classics, because honestly, we were running out of characters at this point in the line. So all of He-Man and his new allies, and you can see Jetpack is helping bring He-Man into battle there. They are heading towards the Temple of Power. And Skeletor is there waiting with his new allies, which are the runners-up from the modern create a character contest, along with one or two new ones like Muckman there. And they get into a giant battle. And again, you can see Jetpack there in the background in the bottom right. And this was a really fun way to have the modern and new Create a Character contest runners-up both be in canon and fight each other. And beyond being cool, again, it was a way to set up more characters that could potentially be action figures, because at this point in line, we were really scraping the bottom of the barrel. I mean, we were making Sky High here, who was a figure based on a background image in one of the cross-sell posters. You saw this guy flying the Wind Raider, this unknown blue-helmeted guy, and we made him as a figure because he was awesome. But that's sort of the level of figures we were making. We were long past main A-list characters, and we were finding, or at least trying to find, ways to reissue A-list characters with slightly different looks or different heads, different armor. And this, I mean, don't want to say it was difficult to find excuses, but fans wanted more original characters. They really weren't interested in continually reissuing the A-list characters, which sold a lot better. So the mini comics became a tool to introduce new versions of characters like the Spirit version of Hordak, or new entire brand new creations that could potentially, if fans were asking for them, we weren't going to force them on fans, but if after we introduced figures in the mini comics like Prince Randor and Prince Keldor, or Lady Slither, who was an original character, who was the leader of the bad guys on Trala there. That was her faction, much like King Hiss has his faction. If fans were asking, whichever characters they gravitated to, this would be at least a pool that we could draw from. So we kind of waited to see what fans were going to say. We even did things like created original playsets with the idea that, again, if fans were really asking for things like this, at least it had the potential to make it in the line. We weren't going to force it into the line, but we were going to wait to see what fans say. All right, back to Jetpack. So he is wearing a Trollan suit of armor, hence he's on Trala. So this is sort of what the Trollan military would wear. They would recruit humans to help fight for them, in hand-to-hand combat. And it makes sense that since the Trollans were so involved, that they would place one of these suits of armor inside Castle Grayskull should anyone need this specialized armor. So that's where it comes from. It comes from Orko's planet, and it's kind of the standard armor that the Trollan army wears. And it could either be inhabited by a Trollan or by a human. Trollan, manipulating it by magic. And that is why there is one inside Castle Grayskull. It was left there by Orko's people, who were overseeing the protection of the sword. And once they knew the sword was on Eternia, they wanted to make sure Eternia had all the protection it needed. So they left one of their armor suits there. And that is where it comes from. And if we'd gotten to a Jetpack figure, we could have done this as a fully articulated figure and just done two heads. One is his head and one is the blank head, like the armor. And that is how the armor was intended to make its way into classics. We just never got to it. I hope you liked this video. Please do share it with others. Let me know any comments below and I'll answer every single one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.